Good morning. As part of our series of faculty lecture, so today the lecture will be on management of abdominal tuberculosis. So this is part of our series of lecture from recent advanced surgery. So we'll go through the abdominal tuberculosis and at the end something about anoperineal tuberculosis. So share screen. Good morning. So we'll have a discussion for next 40 minutes for abdominal tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is the most important communicable disease worldwide, and this is still prevalent in underdeveloped and developing third world countries. In developed countries, the incidence of tuberculosis has gone down to large extent because of some preventive measures. However, recently there has been some report of some increasing incidence in tuberculosis in developed countries also because of transglobal migration, aging populations, smoking and alcohol, socio-economic deprivation, and insurgence of HIV infection. Most common site for tuberculosis infection is pulmonary tuberculosis, and about 10 million new cases occur every year. Abdominal tuberculosis is a part of extrapulmonary tuberculosis. As a whole, the incidence of extrapulmonary tuberculosis is between 15 to 20%, and of this, 3 to 6.7% are of abdominal tuberculosis. When you talk of abdominal tuberculosis, you talk of basically involvement of some structures inside the abdomen. This can be either gastrointestinal tract, anywhere from esophagus to the anus. It can be involving the peritoneum. It can involve the mesenteric or the retroperitoneal nodes, and it can involve the solid organs like liver, pancreas, kidneys. Abdominal tuberculosis is the third most common site of extrapulmonary tuberculosis. This tuberculosis in the abdomen has a very slow course of the disease, and the manifestations are sometimes very protean and non-specific. And unless you have a high index of suspicion, it is difficult to come to a diagnosis of abdominal tuberculosis. However, there are large series of patients of abdominal tuberculosis being reported from Asian countries and third world countries. What are the risk factors for development of abdominal tuberculosis? Basically, malnutrition, diabetes, underlying malignancy, cirrhosis of liver, immunosuppressed state like HIV infection or steroid therapy, post-transplant patient who are on immunosuppression therapy, and patient who are renal failure on continuous ambulatory peritoneal dialysis. So how does the infection spread to the abdominal cavity? It can be either a hematogenous spread with a primary in the lung. It can be as a part of miliary tuberculosis. This can occur because of ingestion of mycobacteria either from active lung lesion by ingestion of sputum or by ingestion of unpasteurized milk. It can be either a direct spread or contiguous spread from adjacent organs like fallopian tube, or it can happen by lymphatics. So in abdominal tuberculosis, as I said, that sites of involvement will be gastrointestinal, maybe peritoneal, be solid organs, and lymph nodes. Most common form of abdominal tuberculosis involve the peritoneum, intestine, and/or lymph nodes. The gastrointestinal tuberculosis affecting the GIT includes 1% of all tuberculosis. Any part of the GI system is affected. In descending order, the commonest site is ileocecal region and the terminal ileum. And in descending order, it can involve the ascending colon. It can happen in the jejunum, appendix, duodenum, stomach, esophagus, colon. Rectum and anal area are involved very rarely. The most common site is ileocecal region. This has been said to be, this area has got a narrow lumen. There is stasis of food in this site, and there are abundant lymphatics. The second most common site is colon, followed by stomach, esophagus, and the anorectal area. What are the forms of tuberculosis that affect GIT? This can be an ulcerative form. The typical ulcer in tuberculosis is a transverse ulcer in the mucosal area, and on healing, this can cause fibrotic narrowing. This can be a hypertrophic type of tuberculosis when it forms a granulomatous mass, or it can be a combination of ulcer of hypertrophic, and sometimes there is ulcer is not revealed, but there is gradual fibrosis of the transmural layer of the gut. The peritoneal tuberculosis may be a manifestation of a disseminated tuberculosis, or it can be an isolated form of tuberculosis. And these are most common for abdominal tuberculosis. The peritoneal tuberculosis may be of three forms. It can be wet or ascitic form. Patient has ascites. On ascitic evaluation, we diagnose the patient has got peritoneal tuberculosis. Or it can be dry adhesive type when there is extensive band formation in the peritoneum, and these bands may form between the peritoneum and the gut and may be a cause of obstruction. Or it can be a fibrotic fixed type with localized ascites and omental thickening. A rare form of peritoneal tuberculosis is one where there is formation of adhesion and formation of a membrane which encapsulates the whole of the gut, forming an abdominal cocoon. And cocoon formation can lead to formation of an abdominal mass which is palpable, or patient can present with signs and symptoms of acute intestinal obstruction. This is a classical abdominal cocoon when the whole gut is invested by a membrane-like structure, and on lysing you can find the evidence of tuberculosis. How does the patient abdominal tuberculosis usually present? As I said, these manifestations are usually non-specific, usually is having an incident onset. Symptoms may occur for months or weeks, or sometimes patient may present with subacute or acute intestinal obstruction. The general symptoms of tuberculosis like fever, loss of weight, and loss of appetite is present in abdominal tuberculosis. And apart from this, patient may have abdominal pain, and this pain will be depending on the site of involvement. If the patient has got ileocecal tuberculosis, patient may have pain mimicking acute or recurrent appendicitis. Or patient may have pain because of a stricture formation, which will be pain because of a mild obstruction, which can be a subacute obstruction in the form of pain abdomen, mild distension, constipation, or vomiting. Involvement of the colon with a tuberculosis leading to an ulcer can cause sometimes massive rectal bleeding. On examination, a typical dowry feel of the abdomen is there. Patient may have ascites. Patient may have hepatosplenomegaly in 2 to 8% cases. And in abdominal cocoon, you can palpate a vague mass in the abdominal cavity. What are the differential diagnosis of patient with abdominal tuberculosis? If you have a peritoneal tuberculosis, when you have tuberculosis in the peritoneal cavity or a fibroid of peritoneal cavity, in that case, the commonest and closest different diagnosis is peritoneal carcinomatosis. And it is sometimes difficult to differentiate the peritoneal tuberculosis from peritoneal carcinomatosis. This can be differentiated by ascitic fluid analysis and the cytology positive malignant cells. And computed tomography can show omental thickening and low attrition mucin ascites. However, no imaging findings is conclusive for diagnosis of peritoneal tuberculosis versus carcinomatosis. The other closer differential diagnosis of abdominal tuberculosis will be Crohn's disease. Again, Crohn's disease is a disease which is manifesting like all the presence of tuberculosis, and sometimes very difficult to differentiate Crohn's disease from tuberculosis, because in histology also there may be a granuloma formation. But the main important part for differentiating Crohn's disease from the tuberculosis is where you can demonstrate the mycobacteria in histology. Other differential includes appendicular lump, other causes of intestinal obstruction, radiation enteropathy, lymphoma, or malignant mesenteric tumor. So, how to diagnose abdominal tuberculosis? There is a described criteria known as Postian criteria to diagnose abdominal tuberculosis. These criteria include suggestive operative findings. As I said, in operative finding, you may have tuberculosis, you may have stricture, you may have fibrotic bands causing obstruction. Or in histology, you can find tuberculosis with casetic necrosis. You can have similar histology from the mesenteric lymph nodes. And on culture of this lesion can grow mycobacterial tuberculosis. And on histological side, you do the examination, you can demonstrate acid-fast bacilli. But these criteria are difficult to establish in all cases. And there is a modification to this criteria when a empirical antitubercular treatment can cause a resolution of the symptoms. That is described as Logan modification of Costigan criteria. You may have this lesion being present and this lesion going to heal with antitubercular treatment empirically. So the investigations required for diagnosis of abdominal tuberculosis. This will include some radiologic investigations, some biochemical, histology or cytology, and microbiological, including some molecular test and ancillary supportive test. So chest X-ray is required for diagnosis of associated pulmonary tuberculosis because in some cases, in about 25% cases, you can have some evidence of pulmonary tuberculosis, active or past. Some interferon gamma release assays are also showing positivity for mycobacterial infection. HIV testing should be done in all patients suspected to have abdominal tuberculosis. So there are the two test sections. On the left side, you find there is an infiltrated lesion in both upper zones. And on the right side, you find there is miliary tuberculosis. So if you have such features, then these are the pointers to the diagnosis of abdominal tuberculosis. Mantoux test is a commonly test done, but it may be sometimes a supporting diagnostic tool. However, positive test does not always indicate active disease. Negative test, however, does not exclude tubercular lesion. In abdominal tuberculosis, it may positive form about 60 to 100% cases. In cutaneous tuberculosis, it can present over 67%. Sometimes you may have false positive Mantoux being positive when the patient has got BCG vaccination or patient has infection with other mycobacteria. The false negative may occur in patient having disseminated tuberculosis, patient with immunosuppressed state like being steroid therapy or patient with HIV infection, or patient in extremes of age may have a false negative Mantoux test. The next common investigation to do is ultrasonography. There may be different findings in ultrasonography in abdominal tuberculosis. You can demonstrate ascites. The enlarged mesenteric or return nodes can be demonstrated on ultrasonography. You can see the multiple enlarged nodes in the mesentery with the hypoechoic area in the center. There can be a mass in the lymph nodes or there can be a conglomerated thickened momentum, which sometimes we demonstrate in ultrasonography. Although barium meal follow-through examination was done earlier and it has a number of findings in abdominal tuberculosis, either in the form of showing a narrowing in the gut or a classic appearance of ileocecal tuberculosis. When you find there is narrowing of the terminal ileum, there is displacement of the cecum is drawn up and contracted. But these barium studies are not being done now with the advent of tool called the CT scan, and CT scan has replaced the barium studies. So CT scan is very important tool for diagnosis of abdominal tuberculosis. It can identify the both intraluminal and extraluminal abnormalities. Ascites is easily diagnosed. In gross peritoneal omental thickening or nodularity can be picked up by a good CT scan. CT scan can pick up mesenteric nodes where you have a node showing either hypotension center or calcification. And the thickening in hyperplastic tuberculosis you can diagnose by gross wall thickening in the wall of the gut. So this is a CT picture of a ileocecal tuberculosis where you find in the right leg fossa there is gross thickening of the gut wall, and you can appreciate the dilated small bowel loops. So this is a typical CT picture of a gut lesion having hyperplastic tuberculosis and the evidence of subacute obstruction. You can have a colonic thickening with narrowing showing stricture in CT. So this is a CT scan showing gross ascites with conglomeration of all the gut loops. And sometimes in hepatic tuberculosis, the liver may appear granular or nodular. You can appreciate the multiple lymph nodes which are calcified. So a long-standing tuberculosis can cause calcification in the lymph nodes. Interstitial stricture can be easily demonstrated either in a plain CT scan or better by a CT enterography. So this is a classic stricture lesion in tuberculosis. CT enterography gives a very good delineation of small gut, and you can diagnose the site of stricture and the evidence of dilated gut loose proximal to the site of obstruction. It is very difficult to differentiate the stricture lesion, and diagnosis of tuberculosis is not certain with imaging. MR enterography is another investigation which is coming up for diagnosis of intestinal stricture and tuberculosis. Diagnostic colonoscopy in patient with affection of colon, rectum, or the ileocecal region. A diagnostic colonoscopy can show some findings like it can show polyps, it can show intestinal ulcer, it can show stricture, and ileocecal bulb may become papulosus. However, similar findings in colonoscopy may be found in Crohn's disease. So it is difficult to diagnose by gross appearance between the Crohn's disease and tuberculosis. You see, these are the different findings one can have in colonoscopy. It can be either a polypoid lesion, it can be a proliferative mass inside the lumen, or it can be a cyanotic lesion. And with treatment, with antiviral treatment, this can show resolution. That is one important points in favor of diagnosis. Where you have a chronic lesion and you give the patient antitubercular therapy, and this is going to resolve. And classical appearance. If you do a biopsy from this lesion, the classical appearance described in tuberculosis is a caseous necrosis, where there is necrotic area in the center, and you can find around this there will be Langen type of giant cells and epithelioid cells. However, these granulomas are not unique to tuberculosis. You may have such a necrotic lesion in Crohn's disease, fungal infection, and sarcoidosis. However, multiple large confluent granulomas are usually suggestive of tuberculosis. If you can demonstrate acid-fast bacilli in this histology slide, that is a diagnostic point in favor of tuberculosis. How to diagnose peritoneal tuberculosis? Usually, one form of peritoneal tuberculosis is presence of ascites. So, ascitic fluid examination is one important pointer to diagnose of peritoneal tuberculosis. The classic fluid in tuberculosis is stalk color fluid. If you do a histology with lymphocyte predominant, it will be exudate with high amount of protein. And if you do a D-aminase ADA in ascitic fluid, that will show higher value in more than 39 insulin unit. This may, however, be seen falsely in patient with cirrhosis. However, the newer test of PCR test for peritoneal fluid can be a point in favor of diagnosis of tuberculosis. Another important way to have diagnosis of peritoneal tuberculosis is doing a diagnostic laparoscopy. If you can do diagnostic laparoscopy, you can find the tubercles, which may be there in the peritoneum or in the gut wall, or you can find the nodular or omental lesions. From here, you can take a biopsy and prove the diagnosis of tuberculosis. A number of molecular tests is available for diagnosis of tuberculosis. A multiplex PCR is excellent sensitivity for peritoneal tuberculosis and GI tuberculosis. Apart from this, expert MTB and rifampicin sensitivity test is another adjunct for diagnosis of tuberculosis. The PCR using 3 genes, although positive, has low sensitivity for diagnosis of tuberculosis. There is another way to have a diagnosis of tuberculosis. Sometimes with all investigations, it is difficult to reach the diagnosis of tuberculosis. In that case, there is a role for giving empirical antitubercular treatment in patient with signs symptoms suggestive of abdominal tuberculosis. And if you have a good response to this empirical antitubercular treatment, it is possible to diagnose abdominal tuberculosis. So, in suspected abdominal tuberculosis, if you give the patient empirical treatment, the response rate may vary from 94 to 99%. As I said, the symptoms of Crohn's disease may be overlapping with abdominal tuberculosis. In those cases, although patient with Crohn's disease may have ulcerative tuberculosis, there may be some improvement with antitubercular treatment, but the response rate is much lower than a patient with abdominal tuberculosis. And the important point to diagnose tuberculosis or Crohn's disease based on the empirical treatment is doing a repeat endoscopy where it will show the healing of ulcers. If it is tubercular lesion, it will show healing of ulcers in all patients. In Crohn's disease, 5% may show healing of ulcer. 95% the ulcer will persist and will exclude a abdominal tuberculosis. So how to differentiate between abdominal tuberculosis and Crohn's disease? Both are chronic granulomatous disorders, and the findings may be having identical clinical, endoscopic, and radiological histology fixed. Misdiagnosis is common. If you misdiagnose, the consequence is going to be disastrous, because if it's a Crohn's disease, the treatment line is totally different. You give the patient steroid, you give the patient some immunosuppressant, and this treatment will be detrimental if the patient is having a diagnosis of tuberculosis. So a correct diagnosis is very important in such situation, and diagnosis will be based on imaging, maybe endoscopic, or from the molecular test, and finally from the histology. How are we going to treat abdominal tuberculosis? As I say, there are different forms of abdominal tuberculosis. There are some situations where the patient present in emergency with features of subacute or acute obstruction. So this scenario is different. Apart from this, most of the patient present with different non-specific symptoms, and sometimes it is difficult to come to a diagnosis at the end of all investigations. So treatment for abdominal tuberculosis is challenging. The criteria for determining response to treatment is not clear, and recognition and treatment of secondary abdominal tuberculosis is important, because if we treat the abdominal tuberculosis antiviral drugs, patient may have relief of symptoms, but subsequent to this treatment, patient may have some sequelae like a adhesive obstruction, or patient may form a stricture with healing of this ulcer. So appropriate duration of therapy for abdominal tuberculosis is 6 months, is a RNTCP CAT1 treatment with initial 2 months of intensive treatment with 4 drugs, and subsequent 4 months will be 2 drugs. So how to assess response to treatment in patient abdominal tuberculosis? So patient will show a sense of well-being. Patient fever may subside, patient appetite may improve, patient general well-being may come. And for intestinal tuberculosis, if you have shown a ulcerative lesion with endoscopy, then you should do a repeat endoscopy to find the healing of ulcers. If the ulcer is healed in 2 to 3 months' time, you can be certain that you're treating a patient of abdominal tuberculosis. If the patient has got ascitic form of abdominal tuberculosis, with treatment, patient should have resolution of abdominal tuberculosis. Patient with abdominal cocoon, where you have a membrane forming around the gut, may resolve with antiviral treatment and no surgery may be required. However, in patient having a stricture, if 50% patient may have resolution symptoms with no features of obstruction, but more than 50% patient may have some residual symptoms, and they are the patient who are candidate for subsequent surgical treatment. How to follow this patient up on antiviral treatment? Most of the patient disease may heal and patient relief of symptoms. Some patient may have persistent symptoms in the form of peritoneal lesions, where patient may have some chronic pain abdomen, patient may have features of subacute obstruction, or patient may have intestinal stricture, where patient may either present with subacute or acute intestinal obstruction. When do you need to intervene by surgical means in patient abdominal tuberculosis? As I said, some patient may present in emergency. It can be either a perforation, the site of tubercle ulcer, patient having immunosuppressed state, patient on steroid therapy, patient are poorly malnourished. This ulcer can progress and lead to perforation. And once a patient has got perforation, patient will have all signs and symptoms of perforative peritonitis in the form of pain abdomen, fever, patient may become toxic, patient may have all abdominal features of peritonitis. So in those cases, main treatment will be resuscitation. A chest X-ray may reveal free gas under diaphragm, and subsequently should be a exploratory laparotomy. And on laparotomy, this perforation management will decide on number of factors. If the patient has got active tuberculosis with multiple tubercles, sometimes simple closure may not help. If it is a stricture with perforation, in that case, patient may require a gut resection anastomosis. And if the patient is nutritionally down, patient has got anemia, patient has got hypervolemia, some patient may require formation of a stoma. proximal stoma. If it is a patient having a fibrotic lesion, having stricture, these are the patient who may have subaqueous obstruction. And patient subaqueous obstruction, once you do the workup, do the radiology investigations, you can start this patient on empirical antibiotic therapy, antitubercular treatment. If the patient respond, patient may heal. But as I said, in 50% cases, the sequelae of this stricture may progress and patient may have persistence of symptoms after complete antitubercular treatment. So these are the patient who will require surgical intervention. Some patient with coronary tuberculosis may present with massive GI bleed. So this GI bleed has to be treated with the usual lines of initial conservative treatment. And if the patient resolves, you can continue conservative treatment, do the investigation, and once you diagnose, start the antitubercular treatment. Massive bleeding, which are not controlled by conservative measures, they are the patient who will require either radiological intervention or surgical treatment. A review of 757 patient abdominal tuberculosis patient revealed that 1/3 of the patient having abdominal tuberculosis will need surgical treatment. However, this has been questioned that this is a paper published from surgical unit. So maybe that these are more selected patient who has features of obstruction or features of subaqueous obstruction requiring surgery. But some intestinal strictures now can be managed with endoscopic dilatation. So what surgery do in these patients? As I said, we do most of the time, we say acute emergency is a laparotomy. And in some cases with chronic abdomen, it is possible to do laparoscopy where it can be either diagnostic and in some cases therapeutic. If you have band obstruction, you can lyse the band laparoscopically. You may have a suturing lesion, and patients who are good at suturing in laparoscopy can manage the patient laparoscopically. So what are the types of surgery you do? In elective setting, if it is adhesion, you can do adhesiolysis. If it is a stricture, you can manage the stricture by either a stricturoplasty or resection. So these are patient having a stricture. So in stricturing lesion, either you would do a resection anastomosis or you can do a stricturoplasty. That means you make an incision along the axis of the gut and suture it in the opposite direction. So some points about anoperineal tuberculosis. The involvement of the anal canal and the rectal area is rare, is about 0.6% of abdominal tuberculosis. Is common in man. Patient having a habit of sexual intercourse, anal intercourse have higher incidence. This is common in 4th decade of life, and some patient pediatric age group has higher incidence of anal tuberculosis. So how does this anoperineal tuberculosis come from? This can coexist with pulmonary lesion. This can happen because of ingestion of air secretion or ingestion of contaminated milk. It can be part of hematogenous spread as a part of miliary tuberculosis, or it can be a direct spread from the pelvic organs, from genital organs, or it can be a spread by lymphatics. So how does a patient with anoperineal tuberculosis present? They can present with constitutional symptoms like noticeable symptoms of fever, loss of appetite, loss of weight. The sign symptoms may mimic Crohn's disease or malignancy because they are the patient who may have a nodular lesion in the anal canal, may have ulcerative lesion, may have multiple perianal fistula. These are the patient who can present with bleeding perineum, and these are the patient who can present with a chronic stricture with increasing constipation, and you diagnose a rectal or anal stricture by digital or endoscopic examination. In perineal tuberculosis, again, patient may present with perineal fistula as a sequelae of perineal abscess, and this fistula are usually multiple, classically described as a watercan peritoneum, and it can be an isolated skin tuberculosis appearing in the perineal area in the form of lupus vulgaris or tuberculosis verrucocutis. Patient may have anal ulceration, lymphadenopathy. Patient may present with nodules in the anal canal or may present with the anal fissure. So these are the classic appearance of water-cut perineum, where you have multiple opening around the anal canal area. So classically described as a water-cut perineum. Some of these patients may present with atypical perineum, like it may be just a perineal sinus. It can be submucous mass, or it can be a recurrent perineal lesion. It heals and again it comes up. You see, this is a perineal abscess. Multiple perineal abscess has been drained, and a biopsy has revealed that this is a tuberculosis. So how to confirm diagnosis of the anoperineal tuberculosis? Again, the diagnosis is challenging. The tuberculosis and Crohn's has overlapping features. So you have to take into account the clinical, radiological, endoscopic, and histologic features. And as I said, these histologic features even may overlap with some fungal infection, some cases of Crohn's disease. However, demonstrated AFB in the smear or culture is diagnostic of tuberculosis. So diagnosis can be based on clinical examination, routine blood examination, where if you find lymphocyte predominance, ESR being high, Mantoux test may be positive. The discharge from the perineal area may be taken for smear and culture. The radiology examination, endoscopy, and molecular test may be of adjunct for diagnosis. AB smear and culture, if you have, you can demonstrate 10 to the power 5 bacilli per ml in AB smear, that is diagnosis of tuberculosis. This efficacy can also be increased by concentration method. The culture for microbiome now is, apart from conventional LJ media culture, you can have now a faster bacterial culture or a MB beta culture, where you can demonstrate bacilli more faster than the conventional 6 weeks. So histopathology may show a classical tuberculosis. We already described that there will be caseous necrosis and there will be Langerhans and epithelial cells. So again, radiology, patient may have anal tuberculosis with associated abdominal tuberculosis. So if you do the abdominal imaging, you can demonstrate associated abdominal findings and you may have associated perineal findings. A fistulogram can demonstrate multiple perineal fistula. A endoanal sonography can show a fistula tract in the anal canal, and this can demonstrate multiple branching also. So this anal endosonography can demonstrate that there is a fistula tract. The MRI of the perineal area can show the fistula tract. It can show the branching, and the complex anal fistula may be diagnosed easily on MRI, and sometimes the MRI can demonstrate the osteomyelitis involving the coccyx. In rectal and anal tuberculosis, a sigmoidoscopy is good enough to diagnose, where you can show the mucosal ulceration, nodularity, stricture, or pseudopolyp formation. Again, the first difference that comes with a perineal tuberculosis is Crohn's disease. A herpes simplex virus lesion or cytomegalovirus virus infection may have similar findings. Deep fungal infection, amoebic infection, actinomycosis, lymphangina venereum, ulcerative neoplasm are all different diagnoses, and a biopsy is helpful for differentiation. And again, the molecular test in the form of PCR are helpful for diagnosis of perineal tuberculosis. So again, the mainstay of treatment for perineal tuberculosis is our standard CAT1 regimen, which intermittent intensive phase of 2 months and continuous of 4 months. In some cases, with complex perineal fistula and suppuration, patient may require additional 3 months of therapy. So what is the role of surgery in anoperineal tuberculosis? If the patient has got an abscess, that abscess needs drainage, which can be either image-guided drainage or surgical drainage. A fistula or sinus tract will require complete excision. All fistula tract may not heal with tubercular treatment. Patient having anal stenosis may be either a candidate for a anal dilatation or anoplasty. Patient having rectal stricture may require either a APR or AR. So to conclude about the abdominal tuberculosis, is remain an important concern in developing countries. The diagnosis sometimes are challenging because the manifestation may be non-specific, and often the differentiation from Crohn's disease or other infections are difficult on clinical, radiological, and imaging and endoscopic findings. A empirical antitubercular treatment may sometimes be of help, which may show resolution of symptoms and healing of ulcers. And some patients on antibiotic treatment may show symptomatic improvement, but some may have the sequelae of this tuberculosis in the form of adhesive obstruction or stricture formation, which can either be treated by endoscopic means or patient may require surgical treatment. So an awareness or suspicion about diagnosis of tuberculosis is required for proper diagnosis of tuberculosis and its management. Thank you. So we can have some discussion if anybody wants. Let's see. We can have some discussion on abdominal tuberculosis. Any question? Dr. Acharji, anything to add? Dr. Acharji?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good morning. Very well covered in such a short period, the whole gamut of abdominal and perineal tuberculosis. So I actually have not much to add, but just a comment. When we see a perineal abscess, which might be a tuberculosis, when we have a reasons to doubt that this could be tuberculosis, I think one should be careful about use of antibiotics. Many of the antibiotics are, particularly fluoroquinolones, are added when a multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is detected later on. So when you, for the students, when you start antibiotics, don't use anything that can be added as a second line anti-tubercular drug later on.
Yeah.
Mostly fluoroquinolones and things like that. And now in certain parts of West Bengal, like I have worked in Baharampur, so I have a good experience about that. Many districts are actually having a lot of multi-drug resistant cases. So in those cases, I think it is mandatory to look for drug resistance also. And you have mentioned somewhere while you were talking about this management that when you send the material for investigations, one should always also look for anti-tubercular resistance. So in fact, in certain areas, a gene expert is usually the first investigation that is done to see whether there is a resistance to rifampicin, which is a very useful drug, and many of the multi-drug resistance MDR tuberculosis are actually resistant to rifampicin. So that is one thing I want to add.
Yeah, particularly once you have a multiple perineal abscess or recurrent perineal abscess, when you have strong suspicion of tuberculosis, in that case, you should not start the patient on fluoroquinolones. You should do the drainage, send the pass for AB smear culture, and you can take a biopsy from the wall of the fistula. Dr. Deepak Shah asked how to treat perineal fistula due to tuberculosis. You see, sometimes you are doing a simple fistula, a single fistula, and you have operated, and routinely we do biopsy of all perineal fistula. So with a simple non-complex fistula, you do histology and find tuberculosis. After the fistula being treated either by fistulotomy or fistulectomy, you have to give the patient full course of antitubercular treatment. Or you have a situation that patient has a classical water-can perineum. It is very difficult to do surgery in such perineum. In that case, it is wise to have a biopsy from one of the tract. And if it shows tuberculosis, you start the patient on antitubercular treatment. Some of the patient may require 9 months treatment and reassess the patient. Most of the time, this multiple fistulas may heal with only with antitubercular treatment. But if it persists at the end of even 9 months of therapy, then you have to consider surgical treatment. But initially, a water-can perineum, the treatment of choice is antitubercular treatment followed by reassessment. I hope, Dr. Shah, I have answered your question. If no other question, we conclude today. We have given the November schedule of classes. There may be one or two change, and for other residents, I can request you. What I have trying is the radiology session we'll do in OSCE pattern. That means we'll project an X-ray, and we'll ask about in OSCE pattern what is the diagnosis, what are the two important findings, how do you plan next treatment. So there'll be some question, and we expect the whoever will be present. We can pick up here. We'll have 6 candidates in Bangalore physically present, so they can come up and take 6 such X-rays, and who are online, they can take the X-ray. And what I want is one candidate can keep on answering the one OSCE scenario. So the X-ray part and the specimen part subsequently do in OSCE pattern, so that it gives an idea about how you face the OSCE part of the examination. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Acharji.
Thank you.
Thank you all the audience.